And welcome back to another CIRF report. I hope that all of you noticed that there's some audio differences. That's why we're running a little bit late, and that's why I'm going to try to make this as short as possible. And the camera's even a little skewed, but we've got some crazy energy still. But I'm glad you tuned in, because this week is going to be kind of a mix of power goals, but also some learning from the shadow. And I'm going to explain here in a second. So we still have a congruency score that is fairly high, but as you can see, the purple circle, which represents the astrology, that's all the influences from the astrology. So it's a pretty big, broad circle or ellipse. And you can see that the I-Ching is the blue circle and the green is the Dreambot. That only represents about half of the astrology. And I have a high congruency score because the Dreambot and the I-Ching are very well overlapped with the influence. And that's why, remember, this chart here is just a summary of the influence only. And for the influence, we're worried about transforming the shadow weakness into growth. It's going to be a learning environment with some potential for relationship conflicts, but it doesn't have to be current relationships. Maybe somebody that you're meeting, there might be a conflict there or misunderstanding. And also there's kind of a transforming shadow into something useful on learning how to be more real. And so let's, there's so much to talk about here. Let's suffice it to say that the astrology has a lot of opportunities. We have a new moon. We have the ego with, or the sun ego with sextiles. So there's a lot of opportunity there. But we have Venus with multiple squares. That can produce some relationship conflicts, some misunderstandings, some feelings of isolation or non-acceptance. And so, but all these things feed into the shadow. You're going to see the shadow of yourself, which is the kind of the weakness, the part that we shove underneath the rug. That's going to kind of come rearing up. And then we're going to talk about the ascendant. So we look at the Dreambot, and let's just go ahead and get right into it, because I could talk all day on this one slide. And I'm sorry to cut this short, but it is kind of getting late. Here's the Dreambot. We have two basic memes. The ascendant is, in astrology, the ascendant is your public face. It's the mask that you put on. This is how people perceive you. This is how you want to be perceived. And in the astrology this week holds very particular importance, particularly on the new moon. This is an incredible new moon on Sunday. By the way, this period is for February 20th through February 26th, from Thursday to Wednesday. And this Dreambot here is the Dreambot conducted on February 19th, 2020. It has two basic memes, the ascendant and the shadow. The ascendant is the public face. The shadow is what's hidden underneath. And it's more in the subconscious. And we kind of shove all that dark material that we don't tend to like, and we put that under the rug and hope that nobody sees it. Well, now it's going to be coming rearing up, and the Dreambot, the collective unconscious, even agrees with it this week. Or that's the latest influence, is we kind of got a battle for what we're showing to the public, our public face, and the shadow. As that comes rearing up. I won't even go through the words there, but the bigger of the two, the bigger meme is the ascendant or the public face. All right, that's the Dreambot. That's the collective unconscious. Let's look at the astrology, and I'm going to breeze through this chart. We've been through this chart many times. We don't have anybody transitioning, no planets transitioning signs. The latest was Mercury going into Pisces, Sun going into Pisces, and then we've got all these squares towards the end. Let me get my highlighter out. We got towards the end of the week, it's going to be a far different experience energetically than the beginning of the week. So as we start with these opportunities and sextiles and trines and the new moon, that's going to feel a lot different than after Sunday. So when we get into the first part of next week, that's where all these blocks come in, these squares come in. And let me show you something else. I diagram this out. This is kind of what you're going to see. You're going to see the two following things. This in the green chart, you're seeing the sun with a sextile over to Uranus, and then sun sextile Mars. Those two sextiles are opportunities for ego. Sun represents ego. We have an opportunity to set some goals over on the Mars side. And by the way, Mars is trine Uranus still, and it's near exact. So we're going to see that starting to wane at the onset of this week. But nonetheless, we're seeing a lot of change. We're seeing a lot of ego, opportunity, and we're seeing a lot of easy energy over to Mars, which is about pursuing goals, creating goals, and we can actually create this change. So on the one hand, we're going to see this all the way through the week. That's a very positive thing, very good energetically, very yang opportunities there. However, as you see down here in the lower part of the screen, we see Venus square Jupiter, and that's what we touched on last CIRF report. This is where we kind of feel like it's blocks in seeing the optimism in relationships. And so it's not direct obstacles. It's just something that kind of wedges in between the relationships. So it's hard to see the optimism in that. It's not that you don't appreciate the relationship or you don't understand them. It's just the optimism, the positivity can be temporarily lost in there or blocked from seeing that. Okay. And that could create some conflict, could create obstacles in your life if you try to force that in there, or if you try to pretend there's more optimism than there really is. How about that? So let's get into the day by day, and you're going to start to see these things play out that I already talked about. You can see the sun, sextile, Uranus. Uranus is conjunct with the part of fortune there. That's pretty cool. So very fortunate to be pushing towards your goals and getting your ego in line with your life purpose and powering through any obstacles. Obstacles are going to be coming from this maybe weighing too heavily on the relationships, maybe relying too much on the relationships, maybe pushing for too much healing in those with the Chiron aspect in there, although it's not really conjunct, but they're both in Aries. Aries being the selfish of the 12 signs, very impulsive as well, egotistical, thinking sun as well. So is it positive or is it conflicted? Well, in some parts, it's going to be a really good half of the week, that first half up until the new moon, actually, as of going through the new moon, very good time for self, very good time for an ego identity, a relook. And remember, hiding underneath here is all the shadow that's going to be rearing its head later, all right? On Friday, the 21st, now Venus is also square to Pluto. So now we have blocks, obstacles coming up in order to transform the relationship. So now it's like we're struggling to make the relationship different. It's going to be hard to see the power in that relationship. And this could be easily perceived as conflict. And that's going to be coming up later in the I-Ching. Okay, so when we see the I-Ching, it is talking about these two Venus squares, and there's a couple more squares coming up. All right, Saturday, we have now, you can see this waning, the ego, the sun, and it's one sextile is waning, Uranus and Mars trine is waning. It means it's kind of going out of style as we head towards this new moon. And so look for, kind of maybe misunderstandings again with the Venus aspect, but I think it's okay to just take care of self and arrange your goals and and arrange your identity, be thinking ascendant now. Sun is commensurate with ascendant because ego does have something to do with how I portray to the world. So now we're connecting what's happening here with the sun and the sextiles and what was happening in the Dreambot as of February 19th, as I showed you earlier. All right, now Sunday is when the new moon happens. It's on the 23rd, and it's at 9:32 a.m. Central Standard Time. But there is so much more than just a new moon in Pisces at 4 degrees 29 minutes. So much more than just a new moon here. But nonetheless, new moon in Pisces and a whole bunch of aspects that exacerbate that new moon energy. New moon is kind of an ending of a cycle, starting of a new cycle. And this is the new you as well, because the sun is right there. Obviously sun and moon together, it's a new you. And so taking that theme from the first half of that week, the first part is these opportunities for ego and designing your goals. This is it. As the new moon imparts, it imparts, well, look at what else we have here. We have on the ascendant, at the time of the new moon, you have Uranus and you have part of fortune. They are actually conjunct. So very powerful, very quick change is apparent to the outside world now. So now what you've designed before, earlier in the week with the ego and taking care of and designing the goals and you're way ahead, now it's showing very quickly to the world at large. That's the ascendant. That's exactly what the Dreambot, the collective unconscious, was showing. We still have that trine over to Mars. Mars conjunct the south node in Capricorn. And this is a very old patterns thing. So we might have a tendency, maybe to the outside world, it looks like we're going back and reverting to old goals. But we don't have to because we've already planned out those goals from the days prior. Now, here's the other thing that I didn't mention and probably should have. You have, of course, the moon and the sun together conjunct at 4 degrees 29 minutes, but you also have in the mix Mercury, and Mercury's in retrograde. So thoughts really are returning to the past. So we have two kind of reverting to the past. South node is where we're coming from. It's our karmic past. It's our, maybe the karmic that we've developed, patterns over time. It's kind of what we're growing out of. But Mercury in retrograde's kind of doing that same thing, having us repeat maybe old lessons that we didn't learn properly. Maybe thoughts, old patterns, maybe being drummed up. Mercury's also that short commutes, short-term travel. And so people talk about car accidents in this period of time. But we're more concerned about the bigger picture and the influences. And with Mercury retrograde in the new moon, it can internally feel like old times are re-engaging. But I want to caution you because according to the I-Ching, which we're going to get to here next, this new moon is about the true new you. And so what's happening is with this Mercury retrograde, this is where the shadow pops in. And shadow is going to pop in with, as you engage with other people, as you maybe talk or maybe misunderstand other people, it's that shadow that's coming in. And so the Mercury retrograde is actually exacerbating that process. And according to the I-Ching, it's going to be about learning from that shadow weakness and then presenting that back out to the ascendant, which for, Uranus and part of fortune, very fortunate to quickly bring that out to your public face and represent that to the world, your new change, the new you. It's a new you. All right. Very powerful. But here I caution you, it's an energetic shift after Sunday, after this new moon. There's different alignments that come in, and we've got to shift with it, or else we might get under the tidal wave. And this first shift is the moon making a conjunction with Neptune in Pisces. So things are going to be kind of feeling maybe like shock, maybe dreamy, very, it's hard to get really engaged with the physical reality. And this could be just simply a shock from the ego that's been changed and the new cycle that's just started. That can easily be it, because we've lost a lot of the sextiles and trines that we were used to before. Keep in mind, on the ascendant now, during this conjunction, is the North Node and part of Fortune. They're actually conjunct, and this is looking ahead. So your ascendant looking out to the future, very positive. But don't be trapped in this dreaminess. Now is where, in Tuesday, this is where we need to become very aware of our inner shadow, because it could be coming up with obstacles in the relationship. We have multiple squares to from Venus to Saturn to Pluto to Jupiter, and then you've got the moon in addition making a square over to Mars. So there's kind of a mix between, there's squares to Uranus and Saturn, so there's squares everywhere. It's really starting to get obstacles. It's heavily loaded into relationships, so conflict can arise, but again, blocks to positivity, blocks to transformation. So the answer there is to continue to work on your shadow piece, making sure that, hey, consider that if there's a conflict that's coming up, consider, hey, maybe this is something I need to be working on. If I'm being triggered, it's something from the past coming back to me so that I can work on it and grow from it. That's pretty much exactly what the solution is going to be, by the way. Obstacles galore coming in on Wednesday. And so the last 2 days of this week period is, it's very conflicted, a lot of obstacles, and that's exactly what the I-Ching is going to say. So let's get right to the I-Ching. Stop wasting time. February 20 to 26, what's the influence? Cast the coins, and it went to 44, which is heaven over wind, where, we cast the seeds out last time. We still have heaven on top, wind below. So those seeds now are blossoming, but now it's kind of interesting to see who we're meeting. It's this hexagram is called coming to meet. The element has attracted attention and is pulling on a stronger one. Remember the ascendant? This is what we're putting out to the world. So law of attraction is this new us is attracting new energy, but it may not be all beneficial or all good. When meeting contention in another, it would be wise to examine oneself. The shadow is always portraying the opposite of what we believe about ourselves. Just as hate is the shadow of love and fear the shadow of trust, something is on the horizon that will teach you a great deal about transforming difficulty into meaning. So remember the obstacles in Venus and the relationships. It's not all that helpful to be trying to work out issues inside of those obstacles inside the relationship. Better to be working on self when that happens and seeing how you can personally grow from that shadow work. And this feeds into the whole ego opportunity for this entire week. Okay. We did have a change line of 3. And so that change line says there is a danger of being influenced by a weakness within yourself. So if you're being triggered, even if it's to blame about Venus's squares, that still has to be coming through that shadow inside of yourself. As much as you like to indulge in a certain petty desire, don't do it, at least not now. Indecision in such a situation can be helpful if it leads to insight and proper action in the longer run. So it's not a time to be impulsive, particularly when you notice yourself getting triggered or when you're noticing shadow stuff material coming in. Now, unfortunately, I say unfortunately because it's not a real pretty hexagram. When you change 44 hexagram 3, you get hexagram 6, which is heaven over water, which is conflict. And so it's kind of like power. If heaven is powerful and all yang, water is very soupy, and power to me moving through water, it takes a lot of energy. And this is that conflict. It's kind of the opposites. Conflict often arises when a person who is convinced that he or she is entitled to something meets with opposition. So it kind of goes back to that ascendant and the ego and the shadow. The new ego, the new cycle, the new you is probably going to meet with conflict to the outside world, because people are going to have to adapt to the new you. Anytime there's adaptation, there's potential for conflict, because people, under the law of psychological homeostasis, we want everything to stay the same. And so we resist change. Well, one of the changes, or one of the resistances, is going to be going to result in this conflict. Conflict in which one party is not sincerely, inevitably led to subterfuge and distortions. In such situations, those of a strong character keep a clear head, protect their integrity, and look out for their own interests. Even while seeking compromise, it can help to find a fair-minded mediator who can settle matters. You are being sincere, but may feel obstructed. Remember, part of this work here is taking the shadow and making it a more genuine ascendant, or more genuine public face. And so authentically healing self, authentically transcending shadow into a higher sense of self is growth, but it can feel, even that sincerity can feel obstructed, according to this hexagram. Without defensiveness, try opening to a situation that you would rather not face. Obstacles may block your progress, but they also present a tangible vehicle that allows you to understand how you become stuck. Conflict comes to release you. Remember that. Conflict is not static, and it's not unpurposeful. It is very purposeful. It's to free you from your shadow. It's free you from these triggers that have been haunting you for eons. Conflict festering in a stagnant condition is unhealthy and needs to be addressed. You may feel wronged by another when you must realize that they made their choice based on their needs, and there is nothing to be done except to seek closure. There may be no other solution other than to chalk the event up to a learning experience. Boom, there we go, learning. And the good news in all this, in all things, the good news is that all things change in time, so whatever the conflict, it too will pass. Whew, lots of words there. Let's get to the solution slide. Now, this is the combo slide. So we have the influence on top, the solution on the bottom. On the top, you can see there's really easy energy, opportunities in the astrology, but there's also a lot of obstacles, a lot of Venus relational problems. And we also have the Pisces new moon, dreamy new moon, dreaming new you, new identity. It's all about self. It's all about growing from your shadow. So transforming the shadow. You can see the picture here of the shadows. So finding that shadow weakness and moving that into growth. So here's the best solution to catapult that energy into the best you. First, accept. Find acceptance in your own shadow. It's not a time to hyper-judge yourself or hyper-analyze yourself. Just notice the shadow, accept it. Accept that this is a weakness. Accept conflict. Accept obstacles in your way. Address problems quickly and assertively. Seek closure. Don't stew on problems. And then, above all, learn from the experience, but trust in the flow of life. And ultimately, the new you, the new self, the new ego is going to be real and genuine so that you can remove that mask. Okay? I hope all that made sense. If it doesn't, ask your questions below. I really appreciate everybody's comments. And enjoy this week. Enjoy. It's a growth opportunity, but there's also a lot to be had. And mostly about self and inner healing. Take care, everybody. See you next week.